find local groups in your area. There are startup weekends and AI labs, and just find people who are in a similar stage of development as you and start talking.
Welcome to Lunch with Leaders, the podcast where we explore what it takes to lead, thrive, and create lasting impact. I'm Adaeze, a TEDx speaker, leadership strategist, and the founder of African Women in STEM. Each episode features insightful conversations with innovators, trailblazers, and leaders from around the world who are transforming cultures, redefining leadership, and shaping the future of work. Together, we'll share the stories, strategies, and mindsets that will empower women in STEM to amplify their visibility, influence, and impact. So if you're ready to lead boldly, amplify your voice, and help influence what leadership looks like for women in STEM, hit follow, share this podcast, and join us every week for impactful conversations, powerful stories, and practical strategies. So our guest today is Rich Belsky. So Rich is an entrepreneur, an executive, an investor, and a coach with nearly 20 years experience building, scaling, and supporting high-growth companies. He spent his career advising leadership teams and helping organizations navigate growth, transition, and complexity. He is a 5-time founder with 1 exit. He is a lawyer, has a JD.
Please. I never practiced law. I just got the degree.
He worked closely with founders, board members, C-suite leaders, and investors across multiple industries, bringing steady system-level perspective shaped by lived experience. So what increasingly grounds his work is his commitment to healthy leadership. As a certified yoga instructor, a multi-modality coach trained in meditation and breath work, he supports founders, executives, and teams in developing resilient mindsets, regulated nervous systems, and sustainable ways of operating, especially under pressure. He's driven by purpose, connection, and service, and cares deeply about building businesses and cultures that are both high-performing and human. These two don't go together really well.
They should, though.
Which is why, I'm reading your bio. This is actually absolutely incredible. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation because we're human first. And everything else we do just should add into that, not remove or take away from that. So welcome to the show, Rich, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Adaeze. I appreciate it. I'm so excited to be here. I'm honored. And this is such an area of passion for me. And I know it's an area of passion for you as well. And so I'm just really grateful to be having this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm excited. I'm probably more excited than you because it's so incredible. Like, I didn't know we had a conversation last week and I talked about how everything I think about, the universe just kind of brings it to me. Like this week, I cannot tell you how many people in the space that I've spoken to as late as yesterday. And I'm like, the universe is telling me something. And this message has to be put out there because people are not doing well, okay? And it shouldn't be that way. And we should be able to actually have a whole life and a more wholesome life. And you have simple, easy tools that you can give us to make that happen. So the incredible thing is that you're a 5-time entrepreneur.
You see this gray hair right here, that gray hair right there. I can count each patch of gray hair and map it to either a startup or my 2-year-old, one of those. So I just have to look in the mirror and get reminded of what entrepreneurship has done. But it's also what has grown my heart and my passion and my mission. So yeah, it's a journey for sure.
I like the way my husband said, he says that he's not old, he's distinguished or something very funny like that. Either way, my kids like to say, Mommy, you're old. And I'm like, okay. And you're like, you're supposed to be upset about it, but it's something, the gray hairs or whatever. But, again, it's also shows like what we've been able to accomplish in life, how we've been able to grow and things like that. So hopefully all of those gray hairs are going to come into play as you're talking to us about our topic today. All right. So again, even though they gave you a lot of gray hairs, you did build a couple of companies. You've advised a couple of startups. You've also invested in companies for nearly 2 decades. For some reason, entrepreneurship is glorified. It's like, and there's a good reason for that because most people hate their jobs, hate their bosses, hate all those things. So on the other side, people that are trying to sell this life is like, oh, come over to this side and you never have to worry about anything. And then people come over to that side and it's not the reality. But because they bought into that, they cannot really tell everybody else how far from what they thought it was going to be that it is. And it impacts them. So can you just kind of talk about, entrepreneurship and how when people are in it, what the experience is different from what they thought it was going to be and what issues come with that, in terms of the fact that they can't really be open and honest about what they're experiencing?
I think the biggest thing that shocks people when they get into the entrepreneurship journey, it's not necessarily working 60 to 80 hours a week. It's not, the challenge of raising money. What I've come across and experienced myself is loneliness and isolation. And that comes from a couple of different places. The first, I think, that people experience is it's the hidden cost of holding the mantle of leadership. The narrative around being an entrepreneur and especially accepting money from investors is that you can't break. You have to keep pushing forward. You must move forward at all costs. And asking for help, showing signs of challenge is weakness. The entrepreneur, on the other side, gets into the position of leadership and starts experiencing those pressures. And when you're there, you really start to feel the challenge of and the question around, who do I talk to? You don't want to talk to your investors because you might freak them out. You don't want to talk to your team because you want them to have trust and loyalty and you want to be a good leader. You don't necessarily want to bring it home to your family or your community. And so you're in this position of fast decision making, a lot of pressure, other people's livelihoods at stake. And despite being surrounded by so many people, you're left with the question of who can I really talk to? And that often sends people in a spiral of loneliness and isolation. I like to say that the loneliest moment in entrepreneurship isn't the failure. It's standing in a room full of people like celebrating you, but nobody actually knowing what's going on inside of you. It causes this juxtaposition between head and heart and the outward expression of success and the inward struggle. Paul Graham often talks about the trough of sorrow, which is what happens in a company after a setback. And it can also be after a high moment, like you raise money and then you're in this position where now you have to perform, where you have to find the product market fit. You have to experiment and do all of the things necessary to grow the company. And so you could be coming off of the highest of highs. I finally raised my round of funding and then all of a sudden be in this trough where you now face the pressure and anxiety of how to handle the next steps. But to go back to your question, I think the most shocking thing is that sense of loneliness and isolation that comes along with the entrepreneurial journey. And that's why the work that I do is so passion driven for me. I'm sure we'll get into this later, but I've lost too many community members along the way to suicide or drug overdose related to the entrepreneurial journey. And it often came from that place of isolation. And it is something that we can and are doing something about by changing the narrative around what it means to show strength and how working on your development as a leader, seeking help, having conversations isn't weakness. It's not soft. It's actually foundation for the growth of the company and plugging a leak that does cause the decline of, according to Harvard Business School, about 65% of startups that fail in the first 5 years due to human dynamics issues. It's simply like necessary these days to change this narrative and remove the fear that is placed in the entrepreneurial journey around sharing struggles and seeking guidance and help to work through them.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. It's probably, okay, I'm going to use the word pandemic, but it's a big issue. But for some reason, we don't talk about it enough or recognize that it's actually the problem that it is. So why do you think that this issue of isolation and just loneliness doesn't come up enough, even though a lot of the founders and entrepreneurs are experiencing this? And I mean, from my own experience, I'm going to particularly say people who have transitioned from doing something into entrepreneurship, where they have this whole world that they've been around and kind of used to, and now they're going on this journey where they pretty much have to build up their own community. People are experiencing this, but they're not talking about it as much. Do you have an inkling why?
I think, in fact, I know that it's because we've built a mythology around cost. Like, there's this entire story around what it is to be an entrepreneur and what it takes, and the all-nighters, the super high pressure meetings. Like, it's all based around being driven by the fear that if I don't push through, if I don't handle this burden on my own, then I'm not a true entrepreneur. It's the story. And look, I'm not an advocate for entering into entrepreneurship and ensuring that you have the perfect work-life balance. Being an entrepreneur does require working 60, 80, 100-hour weeks. It does require putting in the time. What I'm advocating for is learning how to grow and develop and make good decisions and lead from a place of healthiness and consciousness while working in those extreme conditions. And I think that the reason why it doesn't get talked about is because it's not cool, it's not sexy, it doesn't align with the mythos and mythology of what it takes to be an entrepreneur in today's environment. And so when you talk about it, you have this fear of being rejected, being seen as not enough, or at worst, in the minds of most entrepreneurs, looking like a failure to their investors and their community. And so nobody wants to talk about it. And it's not realistic, because every entrepreneur goes through this at some point. It's just the narrative, it's the story, and it's something that I'm working very hard to change.
So how do you think, for someone that's listening right now, and it's like, okay, I get it, but how do I talk about it, or with whom, or where do I even start? Because again, it is a problem and we have to deal with it. But I feel that another reason why people don't is because they don't even know how to begin to have those conversations, or with whom.
Really important question. The answer is there are not enough resources right now. But the good news is there are a lot of people like me. My work is through my coaching company called Crevo. And I'm also doing work through an incredible group called the Real Mental Health Foundation. And through this work, I've uncovered a world of people doing this, have recognized the issue. And some people come to it from different angles. Some people come to it through personal traumas and challenges, both as an entrepreneur and losing people along the way. People that I was in the trenches with that didn't make it. Seeing that changed me and provided the energy for me to pursue this. Other people come to this work recognizing the leak in portfolios because of failing startups due to these human dynamics issues, and they want to help the venture funds and the investors plug that leak. But the answer is reach out to people that have been through it. Ideally, the thing that I believe separates me and the work that I do is, as a 5-time founder and a coach and all these other things, I've lived through it. And I offer this real world lived experience that I believe is the most important part in talking to a founder or an entrepreneur or a leader. And it's also something that in the age of AI, it's like, well, I can just talk to AI, but AI cannot replicate that feeling of sitting across from someone who has been through what you're going through, can share that space and talk about the very things and ways that they've moved through it. And so the answer is reach out to someone like me. find local groups in your area. There are startup weekends and AI labs, and just find people who are in a similar stage of development as you and start talking. It doesn't have to be full on emotional crying shares, but if you're willing to open up and talk about some of the challenges that you're experiencing, you will find other people willing to share with you. I did a panel about a month ago here in New Jersey about founder mental wellness, and it was very vulnerable. I had a PhD psychologist with me and a local entrepreneur and professor, and we shared our personal experiences. And the reaction to that in the crowd was tears, not because we necessarily said anything that was so deeply moving, but just being understood breaks down that wall and opens up the possibility of that sharing in a way where you can feel seen, heard, and understood, which are core human needs. It's just important to reach out to people that can provide direct help like me, reach out to community. And then there are other types of paradigms forming. One I learned when I was in the ecosystem in Las Vegas from my mentor, whose name was Jody Sherman. Now, unfortunately, Jody is one of those people that I lost along the way. But before he passed, he introduced a method called Lonely at the Top, which is a circling methodology made up of CEOs and founders in a given geographical area. And you appear together, preferably in person in a confidential way, and you're guided by a facilitator who enables this type of sharing about what's going on in your company. And the group is simply there to listen and provide feedback in an understanding way. And all of this sounds so natural and like obvious, but the challenge behind it is that fear that by presenting and talking about what's going on with you, that you'll appear weak. But when you're surrounded by other people willing to do the same thing, that fear disappears, and it can facilitate incredible growth and really help with that anxiety and stress that's going on around whatever individual issue is happening in the company. So I know that was kind of long-winded, but the answer is try to navigate the fear and be willing to open up and talk to people that you can develop a trust relationship with.
So you mentioned two organizations, Lonely at the Top, and then the other one that you work with?
So Lonely at the Top is a methodology that I facilitate.
Okay, so it's not an organization. Yeah. Okay. What's the other organization that you also say that you work with?
I'm an ambassador for the Real Mental Health Foundation.
Okay. Are they like nationwide or global or
global?
Just to figure out if people can tap in. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're gonna have to share that information so we can share for people to be able to tap into and also check you out, check out your organization too, because your response isn't long-winded. It was actually absolutely necessary, because the consequences of not having these conversations can be very extreme. And I'm glad that we're bringing up this conversation and also giving people tools and opportunities to also be able to express themselves. And then basically, you mentioning this also shows that, or tells whoever listening that it's not just their problem. This is a thing that is happening. So again, if other people are experiencing it, then at least to some level we can normalize being open and speaking about that.
Yeah, exactly right.
So we already talked about how people thinking that it's showing that you maybe have issues is kind of like expressing some kind of vulnerability that is not acceptable. As a founder, for example, you're supposed to show that strength and show that you can get it all done, and so that if you have investors, they're not afraid. If you have team members, they're not afraid either, because maybe wondering if you know what you're doing. But keeping all of this, trying to balance all this stuff and keeping everything inside, I'm sure it does impact our health. What we're talking about now, you might think, oh, it has to do with like your mental health and mental state, but I also know that it also impacts our physical health, like our nervous systems and so on and so forth. Can you kind of make that link for us and kind of talk about why it's important for us to not ignore some of these things, because it can impact our mental health and the well-being, and it can also impact us physically?
Yeah, without a doubt, that's accurate. Every decision that you make passes through your nervous system first. So when you're dysregulated and you're functioning from a place of heightened cortisol, all types of things happen. You lose a lot of access to your creativity, nuance, like empathy, your long-term decision making. When you're operating from this place of heightened fear, from a dysregulated nervous system, everything is filtered through that experience. This is why I developed the methodology that I use, which is called the response gap, which comes from the work of Viktor Frankl. There's a quote that guides much of my work. In between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in that response lies our growth and our freedom. So the quote is so deeply meaningful to me, but it's really three parts. Stimulus, right? What is a stimulus? What is the space and how do you create it? And what do you do in that space? And then what response then facilitates growth and freedom? Most of the time, when we're met with a trigger or a stimulus, we're reactive, right? The nervous system gets activated, the cortisol spikes, and we make an emotional decision. And I'm sure, I know from my own personal experience and probably everybody listening, we've all had reactions based on a trigger that we wish we could take back. Like, I wish I didn't say that thing. I wish I didn't throw that thing across the room. And when you look back on that reaction, you often wish that you had had the presence and awareness to create a pause and choose a different response. And so this is what happens in entrepreneurship, but it's rapid fire. I mean, so many different triggers, so many opportunities for reaction. And now a lot of people question around like, well, what about gut and intuition? And that's a deeper conversation because those things are clearly important. But nearly every decision or every trigger that comes at you can benefit from at least a little bit of space, even 10 seconds, 3 breaths, whatever it takes so that you manage that cortisol spike. You create a little bit of space so that you can actually choose a response that's in alignment with the company's ethos, with your own morality or integrity, whatever it might be. So the problem that happens, to go back to your question, is we're met with one of the many things that happens in business or entrepreneurship. It's a trigger. It requires some type of response. But because we are in such a heightened state, our nervous system is on some scale of dysregulated. Our ability to be creative and develop thoughtful responses gets severely limited. We often react. And in an entrepreneurial situation, that can make the entire thing come crashing down, whether it's something that causes the company itself to stumble or fail, or whether it's something that causes your team to lose trust and faith in you. And this is something I've experienced a lot in coaching. I worked with a client for over 2 years. And for the whole first part of our engagement, he thought he had to always be a wartime CEO, rule with an iron fist, his way or the highway. First and most importantly, it was not authentic to who he was as a person. And when you continuously live wearing a mask, people are going to start to understand that that's a mask and it's coming off as pretense. And that's what happened with his team. And they rebelled. Thankfully, we had been working together for a while and we were able to work through some of these issues related to his reactions through this filter of heightened cortisol and wartime CEO mythology. And when he started expressing himself authentically and taking ownership and being open to listening to what other people were saying, he was able to beat back a coup attempt by his team. And this is just one of many examples of what can happen when you're reacting from that place of emotion versus responding with thoughtful choices. And then the research goes on and on about the impact of stress on your physical health, the impact of repeated fear-based responses creates this pathway to that being the default mode of behavior. And it just takes the ability and the willingness to address and develop how you respond in the face of a trigger. And it can make a deep impact both in your own mental and physical well-being and as a model for people around you.
Do you work with corporations, like CEOs of corporations, a lot, or do you work mainly with entrepreneurs? Because when you talked about the wartime CEO, I worked in an industry where that was part of the reason why I started this podcast too, because leadership was one thing, command and control, my way or the highway, those kind of examples. And when you find yourself in senior leadership and you're not that kind of person, you're kind of the odd man out. So I'm wondering, I know that there's a lot of, you do a lot of work with entrepreneurs, but do you also do work with executives in like organizations?
I have not done a lot of work with like the type of corporation that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I've had opportunities to, and I've chosen to really focus my work on founders because I think executives of larger corporations, when they want to engage coaching, they traditionally go the route of kind of a larger coaching organization, an organization that has the experience and the capacity to scale that coaching within a corporation of many executives. My preference, and that work is definitely needed, and there are incredible coaches out there that do that. My style of coaching, my preferred style, is what I call embedded coaching. And it works best in entrepreneurship. And embedded coaching is not once every 2 weeks, because I believe that that's not realistic for entrepreneurs. My style is every other day, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, working on the methodology and the tools and the systems, and then applying it at the speed with which entrepreneurship develops. It moves so fast that 2 weeks might as well be 2 years. And the opportunity for application of the stuff that we work on within my program is every day, multiple times a day. And when the team sees the shift, or when partners see the shift, or investors, then you get that positive feedback loop and you want to continue doing the work. And then the speed with which the improvements can happen scales exponentially because you're doing it every day or multiple times a day. So yeah, I think it's needed at the corporate level. There are some incredible coaches out there, but my style and my preference is to work with founders and also to work through venture funds, venture studios, family offices to support their portfolios, their portfolio companies. And this is a mission that I've been on for some time. I'm happy to say that the conversations is starting to be heard more. I think as the research comes out on just how prevalent of a problem human dynamics are for the ultimate success of the company. I mentioned earlier, Noam Wasserman of Harvard Business School released a study that said that 65% of startups fail due to human dynamics issues. So co-founder challenges, anxiety, burnout, things like that. 65%. Like, think about that. If there was a leak of 65% in their investment portfolio, stock portfolio, I imagine it would get addressed pretty quickly. And so the conversation around looking at the founder dynamic as important as the data room and looking at the structure or financials of the company, that's starting to get heard a lot more. Something that I'm working on right now is a venture fund and a residency called Warehouse. There'll be a lot more information coming out soon around that, but it is a fund that also does a 12-week residency as a requirement of the investment that the portfolio companies get. And that 12-week residency, in addition to building community and being able to just really focus on the project, is about human dynamics issues. It's about infusing and instilling in these leaders the understanding of what it takes to lead from this place that helps plug that 65% leak and move forward as both a model to their own teams and to the larger entrepreneurial ecosystem as a whole. This is where I think the world of investing, entrepreneurship needs to go, is a real focus on developing early stage founders and leaders. And that's why I focus in that area.
I'm just wondering, when you talked about the 65%, I wonder if it's just, maybe people don't focus on that because of the expectations, because there's this thing that 50% of startups are going to fail in the first so and so years and 70% in the next 5 years, or whatever the case may be. So we just assume that it's okay, which is why, even though it's such a high number, nobody's really paying attention to it. So do you believe that actually adds to this. Because again, another part of that is I have a woman-owned VC fund, and they had an event last year. Their success rate is like 80-90%, which is basically 90% of their portfolio company living around for the last 10 years. But this industry standard is like 30-40%. It's like, oh, they're expected to fail. So do you think that that kind of is a reason why they're failing at such a high rate and nobody's bothering to figure out the reason why?
I think that this goes back a bit to the mythology and story aspect. I think for so long, we've been operating in this paradigm and story that 9 out of 10 startups are going to fail in the first 5 years. That failure rate is just baked into the understanding of what it means to be an investor or to run a fund. And I've personally heard, like, yeah, I don't really care about this. And that's fine. I understand that that is the mindset because the risk is baked into the structure of the fund. And to be quite honest, baked into the way that fund managers are paid. And that's great. And that's fine. But it doesn't have to be that way, right? For whatever my program costs, it's a rounding error in the operating budget of even a small size venture fund. And so for that minimal investment, you can at least address an issue that research shows is causing a 65% leak in your portfolio. And so it's just changing the narrative, changing the story. And when you start changing the story, it impacts the return on investment for investment funds, but back to the development of healthy leaders, which then go on to create healthy teams, more healthy companies. It's a zero downside scenario. The challenge, of course, is that early stage founders, there's not a lot of money for coaching. I mean, once they reach a certain stage, maybe there is, but the funds have the capability to provide resources to at least offer some support to the founders. And if they want to, can look at it as self-serving because research is backing this idea that the majority of startups fail due to these human dynamics issues. I'll point something out that I just found out today, actually. The NFL, the National Football League, has now mandated that every single locker room must have a mental health professional. And I often use the athlete comparison. So this completely validates something that I've been talking about for a little while, which is athletes, it's understood, right? An athlete needs to have trainers, needs to have support staff to help them avoid injury, to keep their mindset sharp, et cetera. And it makes sense because we invest millions of dollars into these athletes. Well, who else has millions of dollars invested into them? The startup founder. And so why is a startup founder looked at so differently than an athlete? And it's a narrative that I talk about a lot. And I'm just so happy to see that the NFL has taken this path. But I believe it's a direct parallel to entrepreneurship. At least as an athlete, if you make it to the professional level, you've been working your way through high school, college, like pre-pro leagues, whatever it might be. And so you've kind of been developed and prepared. But back to what you were saying at the very beginning, a lot of people, they want to leave corporate America and they want to try to start something. And they're coming into it without an awareness of what it actually is like and without the tools necessary to withstand that entrepreneurial journey. And yet they're receiving millions of dollars in funding. And the human operating system of the company has very little support. The thing that actually determines whether the company succeeds or fails has very little support from the very investors that are investing in them. So it's just a matter of changing the narrative, changing the story. It doesn't have to be 9 out of 10 startups fail. If you apply that 65% number, if you can prevent the startups failing from the human dynamics issues, you could have about 6.5 out of 10 startups succeed instead of 1.
I mean, I absolutely love this analogy and it makes perfect sense. Unfortunately, we don't see it that way. I mean, we can't go without talking about like AI. It's a good thing, and sometimes you wonder if it's a good thing because now it's like I remember I attended an event last year and they were talking about, like investors want to invest in AI companies and every company is now an AI company and all of that stuff with all the pressure happening. With AI, there's so much focus on what it's providing in terms of tools and how it's going to make companies more efficient. I remember hearing somebody was saying that, say before, if you were trying to build something, your goal is to go find, say, for example, 10, 15 people that'll help you build that. But that what investors want to see now is how you, one person, maybe plus another person, and AI can do all of that. And I also feel that it's, it's a good thing. And there's also a lot of pressure with regards to that. So back to what you just said about developing, the human and, changing the human dynamics, what do leaders and investors risk losing if they don't intentionally develop the human that is going to use this AI in a way that they use the AI better versus just go save me money because that's what everybody else is doing?
Yeah, AI is, there's no doubt, it's already fundamentally changed the entire landscape, the entire ecosystem. I mean, you can look at the numbers of people losing their jobs right now. Maybe, maybe there'll be a correction. I believe there will be. But AI is necessary. It's here. But I think that what's lost by focusing too much on AI as a leadership tool is the very thing you said. It's the humanity. AI can't sit there and help navigate a team through the emotional response or the fear of having a bad quarter. It's presence. It's like attunement to what's going on, to sit with the uncertainty without transmitting panic. It's the human, the AI should help a leader become more human, because the AI is helping with the very things that might make it easier for a leader or executive to function and create more space in a day. And so I think that what's lost by relying too much on AI as a leader is that very thing that is the glue of a company. That is what keeps a team feeling confident, feeling loyal, feeling connected. AI is great for processes and efficiencies, but it can't be the one that offers team leadership itself. And so I think AI is great and it's helping in so many ways. I often get the question, will AI replace what I do? And maybe, but I know that there is no way that AI, as much as it sounds like my voice, as much as it might know my history and know every coaching technique possible, there is something that cannot be replicated by sitting across from me or someone like me, by seeing the human reaction, by feeling the human empathy and understanding, and by relating lived experience. It's just a different system and a different paradigm. And I think that everybody's going super far to the right, AI for everything. And I do believe that there will be a correction when people realize that as amazing as AI is at developing systems and doing tasks and efficiencies, that there's a humanity that cannot be replicated. And that humanity also applies to human leadership.
Yeah, that's also what I believe. And there are a lot of people that share that sentiment as well. But I think, again, with the race to whatever the finish line is that I don't know, leaders and organizations tend to forget, what makes them human and just thinking about the bottom line, which, to your point, with something like this, I'm guessing, I'm not going to compare it to the tech bubble that we had earlier, but it's kind of similar to a point, or maybe the Web3 thing and all of that. There's going to be a point where there's a correction and we kind of go back to what's the real deal and what was just fluff or just maybe just a hype or a scarcity mindset driving it. Thank you for sharing that. So you talked a lot earlier about when entrepreneurs are feeling the pressure to kind of push through because this is what is expected of them by the investors, this is what is expected of them by the team, or just this is what is expected of them in general, because, hey, entrepreneurship is about pushing through and making it happen. But you also, I feel that maybe part of the reason why that happens is because, like you said earlier, most people that get into entrepreneurship don't get the kind of support, say that, for example, people in sports to get, because like you said, some of them actually started playing when they were in elementary school and then all the way to the pro leagues. So some of them don't have, I'll probably call it, using your words, a system level perspective. And that might be the reason why they focus on maybe solving today's problems, just trying to get this one thing done. With the work you do with systems thinking, how do you help people step out and just look at things from a different perspective to be able to lead better and move their companies forward in a way that is more sustainable?
There's a lot there. There are systems across the board, both from a personal life system, then there are systems within a company, and then there are systems external to all of it. And a lot of what is applied, it depends on where a person is. Where are they in their life? Where are they in their company? All of that really informs the different types of systems that go into how I do my work. And so one of the first elements, because I am a yoga instructor and a meditation coach and a breathwork coach and all of that type of stuff, one of the most important and first is gaining understanding of how to manage your internal state. It all starts with the person. Anything can be happening in the company, anything can be happening externally in the world, but the first step is understanding self. And that is, I say it like it's a simple, easy thing, right? But it's a lifetime pursuit. But there are some good initial steps that you can take to start understanding how to go back to my kind of methodologies to create that space. And this sounds like obvious entropy or whatever, but some of the most powerful things I know to train yourself and how to start creating a system that enables you to handle the challenges of entrepreneurship, breath work, meditation, prayer, whatever it might be in your life that takes you from the head, moves you to the heart, and gives you an understanding of what's actually going on in your human system. Again, using the methodology, right? That stimulus, like it could be my child crying. It could be an argument with my partner. It could be anything that just causes that impetus to have an emotional response, to react rather than respond. And the work that we do in the quiet moments, the work that we do in our personal life to increase our capacity to create that space, all of that is directly applicable to how we apply it in the business and the entrepreneurial setting. And so when I'm working with clients, we start wherever they are, but meditation, even if it's like 3 minutes a day, is usually perspective shifting. Inserting that system that shows you how to take stock of where your emotional state is when you're at home and it's quiet, over time, expands into the ability to do the very same thing when you're in the work environment. The things that we can do at home to help build that resilience and that capacity for response. When you're in a company, now we're kind of like moving that personal work down the path a little bit into what you can do in a company. Most of what people are looking for in a company, and many of the reasons why dynamics falter, is because of some core human needs. The need to be seen, the need to be heard, the need to be understood. These are the roots of why things turn into such huge problems that often, had a system been in place, would never have developed into what it turned into. Resentment builds, trash talking, like we've all been in that corporate environment where there's a seed planted and then the cancer grows around it. So what I like to do when I'm working with teams is work on team communication, having really important conversations in a healthy way creating a system around how to have conversations to ensure that people feel heard and understood. Again, it's not soft. It's not like some woo-woo thing. That's why entire industries are created around communication. But applying it into the team dynamic is somehow glossed over, just like why founder wellness is so important. This is one of the core pillars of the work that we're doing with Warehouse, is around team communications. So this is a topic that involves a lot more discussion, but setting up a system so that there's regular, open, and transparent conversation from the top level down has made gigantic changes. So the CEO that I mentioned I work with that wartime mentality, this is a system that we implemented into his company. And it was shocking, but also not shocking, how everybody just wanted him to hear that. And when he started sitting across from them and shutting his mouth and opening his ears and his mind and his heart, it changed everything, because people just want to feel heard. Whether or not what they're saying impacts the company direction or makes any difference at all, people want to be heard. So that's one of the most important systems that can be implemented into a startup or a corporate environment, is creating those mechanisms for people to have conversations in a way that doesn't end up causing cancer down the road. So those are just a few. This kind of concept of the different levels and systems that I can implement is really my methodology. And I know we got to keep somewhat of an eye on time. So happy to share more, happy to answer any questions from any of your listeners. But as I said to start that answer, it really is dependent on who I'm working with, where they are in the journey, both personally and professionally, and having a good, clear line into the goals and the values that are going to drive the work we do as it expands into the world of their business.
Yeah. And I kind of love how you started with the personal and then moved into the professional of the workspace, because somehow, I don't know who told us that, but people try to keep both separate, but you're the one person. And what those two spaces have in common is you. So, like it or not, you're going to carry something from one place to another. And I also talk about like self-leadership and self-awareness. When people tell me they're not leaders, I'm like, at the very basic, you're leading yourself. And self-leadership comes from self-awareness, and then if you can figure that out, then it will be easier, to take care of the issues that you have at work. And with the example that you gave with the CEO you're working with, they kind of have to come all the way back to themselves and then go from there outwards.
Yeah, it's so well said. And I watched your TED Talk, and I was really moved by your story. And not to summarize your own talk, but it was really, really beautiful story around how you felt that you had to act in your company based on your culture and how you felt you needed to fit in or appease your boss. And to your point, trying to separate those two things, it's first of all, it's impossible. And second, it's unhealthy. Mm-hmm. You are one person. You are one organism walking from this place to that place. So whether it's home with the family or at work, sure, it would be great to separate my need to do work at home, my ability to have carved out time for my family, and my ability to go deep into the work I'm doing. But the human organism going from one place to the other, it's one person. It's so critically important to understand that, and then to do what's necessary to be able to be fully authentic in both places. It's challenging work. And in my own life, my challenge was more around these things that we're talking about. The culture for me is the culture of healthy growth, leadership, human development, kind of pan-humanism. Mm-hmm. And walking into an environment that is full of people that don't necessarily think that way is challenging. And in my life, I have definitely felt the need to kind of backseat who I really am to fit in with the culture that I found myself. And then I found that was just impossible. I felt so inauthentic, like I was wearing a mask to please somebody else whose behaviors I didn't agree with. I think it's unrealistic and unhealthy to try to separate who we are, like who we are and how we are being, dependent on the environment that we're going into. Now, of course, some of that is necessary. You want to be respectful to an environment. There are certain places where some of that is needed, but at the core level, who we are and how we present ourselves to the world, merging that beingness into one, and then expressing that in whatever environment you're in, I think is critical to living an authentic life.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think there was a time we are having a conversation about what does it really mean to be authentic. And I'm like you said, of course, I'm not going to show up at work and treat my coworkers like I treat my children. But I know that. So I show up at work and I'm like, okay, this is my colleague. This is how I talk to them. This is how I relate with them. This is how I interact. But that's my decision. That's me making it happen. I was like, when it becomes a problem, it's when somebody's trying to have you adopt something that is unnatural to you. Because to your point, it causes a lot of stress. And also because it takes a long time for that stress to actually have the impact that is literally terrible, because it kind of happens slowly over time, kind of erodes a lot of things. So sometimes you're like, oh, it's okay. So one day you realize that no, it wasn't okay, but then you cannot walk your way back and take back like all the issues that it has caused. Because even in your home, when you're talking to your partner and you turn around and talk to your kid, you're not going to talk to them the same way, because that's the beauty of being human. You kind of know when to show up in a certain way. So authenticity, like everybody that shows up is an adult and grown.
Right.
Well, if they don't start acting like they're not adult and grown, that's a different story altogether. But
Right.
Just let them show up the way they show up, and as long as it doesn't necessarily impact your culture or make everybody else uncomfortable, all that kind of stuff, then it's perfectly fine. If it's just them being them and they like to wear yellow, I mean, I don't see any problem with that, for example, or they're like, oh, I don't like to eat lunch. Okay, so what? Because things like that are kind of like work pressures. Oh, you're not eating lunch? And then you not start eating lunch because everybody's eating lunch. It's all crazy. But
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this stuff. And
Sure.
I want to leave because I do like to talk about legacy. Like, we've talked about the cost of not being aware of the impact of not being authentic, of not focusing on what makes us human, of not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable or build community or speak out. And you're doing a lot of work in that regard in your practice and with other organizations that you partner with. So when you think about your legacy, what are you committed or what are you looking forward to changing for leaders, for entrepreneurs, for builders, so that they no longer have to pay this price simply because they want to serve humanity in a different way, which is like entrepreneurship?
I want the next generation of leaders to inherit a different story about what success is supposed to feel like. Not that there won't be hard seasons in entrepreneurship or business, but that asking for help, developing healthy leadership styles, that is success. It's not weakness. It's not soft. It is the actual foundational work for developing yourself. I think that so often identity is fused with results. So that means that if you have a bad quarter, or even if the company fails, you are a failure. And this is why I've lost friends to suicide in the entrepreneurial journey. That system has a romance to it. Like, it has a story to it in our current society. It's a fascination with I'm willing to lose everything for this business idea. And that narrative is enforced by the investors who want entrepreneurs to face down mental breakdowns and panic and all that stuff in order to return them their dollars. And again, I don't have a problem with people that want that experience, there but for the grace of God go up, right? No problem with that. But it doesn't have to be that way. And that's not applicable to everybody. So what I want to do is I want to help change the narrative of what success looks like. I want to help unfuse a person's identity and experience of life from the individual success of a given company. And by doing so, actually increase the likelihood that that company is successful. And I think that that's the problem with that thinking. There's this thinking that if a founder is not willing to become unhealthy and anxious and face potential self-harm, then they're not the right entrepreneur for me. It's so backwards. It's like, it's ridiculous how backward that is. Because inherent in, and I'm not picking on venture capitalists or investors, right? I am an investor. It's just the system of thinking that's out there. Inherent in the idea that I only want an investor that's willing to have a breakdown is the possibility of them having a breakdown leading to the failure of the company. It's just, there's this romanticism with the idea of a founder being this way and an investor being that type of investor. And it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't have to be that way. And with the application of some resources towards the development of founders and the support of founders who are in that role, we can change the whole narrative, develop more successful companies, eliminate that 9 out of 10 startups fail narrative, plug the leak that is represented by Noam Wasserman's work at Harvard with the 65% that fail, and lay a new foundation for what success actually looks like. Something that has the perspective of a lifetime and the desire for personal development within the paradigm of running a startup company, and thereby raise all tides in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. That's what I'm doing at Crevo. That's what I'm doing with Warehouse. That's what I'm doing in every conversation I have with a client, a potential client, a new VC. Hard times are going to happen. There's no doubt about that. It's how we choose to meet those challenges and how we choose to grow through them that determines whether we're successful or not. And that's the story. That's the legacy that I want to leave, is that being the foundation for the ecosystem.
Thank you so much, Rich. I mean, this has been absolutely incredible. And I know that everyone listening has a lot to take away from this. And I know you're going to share all the resources that you mentioned with us so we can share with the audience. But if someone is saying, okay, I want to reach out to Rich and collaborate, what is the thing that you want them to kind of connect with you and collaborate with you on? And where can they find you easily?
Yeah. So I'm happy to, I answer all emails. I'm happy to give my email. I'm sure you'll probably post it as well, but it's rich at Crevo, CREVO.com. That is my direct email. So you can ping me there. If you're a founder, a leader, a CEO, and this resonates with you, if the idea of having someone to talk to and share struggle with that's been there resonates with you, please reach out. If you are an investor, a fund manager, a family office manager or partner, and you resonate with the idea that by applying some resources to your founding teams and your leaders, you can help change that idea that 9 out of 10 startups fail, reach out to me. I do work myself and through a network of other coaches and service providers to work through portfolio companies and through funds. This is my passion. I believe the result of all of my life experience and training is to offer this to the world in this way. Please reach out. I am available.
I always say, if someone says reach out, do reach out and take advantage of opportunities that you have. And everyone listening, please make sure to reach out. Like you said, I'm on LinkedIn. I don't know why, but I'm on LinkedIn. So follow me as well. Tag us, reach out and tell us what you've learned, what was most helpful for you. And is there anything that you heard here that I didn't know before? I know I heard quite a few. And what you're going to take action on, really. One of the ways you can support this podcast is by following us and giving us a written review. And in future summer episodes, I'll be shouting some of you out and reading your reviews on air. If you're shy, let me know. I'll just put your name as X. Let that not hold you from leaving a review. Thank you so much. We really appreciate our time together and everything you shared.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope we get to do it again sometime soon.
Oh, definitely. We have to come back for like
Lot to talk about.
I mean, because there's a lot to talk about. All right. So thank you, everyone. And don't forget to join us on the next episode. Bye.